people.
There is a giant graveyard under downtown Kansas City.
Let's just get it all out there. Giants are real. They're buried all around us. Big people. You never seen people like this.
It's TinFoil Friday here on MKUSUal. It's like MK Ultra, but more normal.
Yas, queen.
Well, I got a little story, and I'll be honest.
I'm excited. I'm going in blind this week.
This is the mud flood, and I'm just gonna give an overview. I'm not gonna argue for or against it.
Okay.
Because
Teach the controversy.
it is controversial, and there are some big holes in the argument if you look at it from one perspective, but those holes are also kind of an argument for a theory like this to exist.
Do you want to give a brief overview of what the mud flood theory is, or do you have that prepped?
Yes. So basically, it is a theory that there was a cataclysm in the last between 400 and 200 years ago.
Okay.
So like 1850s, and then like from between like 1650 to 1850 roughly.
Okay.
Is the estimation that there was a global cataclysm, and the word mud flood comes from what people believe happened was there was like, we'll get into like what the theories are about what happened, but basically what they are positing happened is that there was liquefaction of the soil. It wasn't a flood from like, tidal wave. It was like mass water came up from the ground.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And like liquefied this, like turned this topsoil into quicksand essentially.
Okay.
And then that happened sometime between 1650 and 1850, and that there was a global civilization kind of under the umbrella term Tartary or Tartarian, and that civilization was wiped out, and that we are a like repopulation of the world and have built our civilization on top of that.
Okay.
So
I'm excited. I've been waiting for this.
there are old maps that show in what is like Siberia, like northern Russia, essentially, in that kind of region, all the way down to like India and the Great Wall. There was this land on old maps that was named Tartaria or Tartary. And the argument goes that like they had a global civilization using like Tesla type free energy technologies.
Okay.
And that possibly he discovered those and did not develop them independently. He like reverse engineered them.
Oh shit. Okay.
From the ideas of, so like the Capitol building in Topeka has a copper dome, right?
Right.
Copper is highly conductive of electricity, and then there are like little spheres on top of these domes that they would have filled with like mercury, free energy. The buildings are made from types of stone that have resonances. Those are just like examples of what level they believe this civilization was at.
Okay.
And then there was that's basically it.
Okay.
That's the base of the theory, that there was a cataclysm, that an old world was lost, and that we are building on top of this old world. And there are like, so here's a picture. This is Kansas City at the foot of Walnut Street. So essentially the river in the north end of Kansas City, downtown, where Walnut meets the river.
Okay.
And these are large, earth cliffs. They're not stone.
That's a real picture.
This is a real picture from 1870. And these wooden structures on top are obviously built on the topsoil, but they're alleging that these red brick structures were excavated.
Oh, it kind of looks like that.
Because they're not. So, this is like shoddy building if you're building these, but if you were to excavate, they'd be like, they're worn and the cataclysm that they suggest was like a geomagnetic storm.
Okay.
That caused like tectonic shifts and like excited the atmosphere to the point that there were plasma, that the atmosphere turned to plasma.
Oh, okay.
So there are like there's a place in Texas called Stonewall, Texas, where it has been excavated, but there's obvious brick or stonework.
That's why they call it stone wall.
It's literally a
Yeah.
stone wall, but the wall was buried. They have excavated this wall. There's a place in Montana that has similar types of stones to like what Machu Picchu has, like kind of the rounded corners or like not square stones, but perfectly fit together. There's this big wall. I can't remember where it is in Montana.
Okay.
This is Kansas City. This is, I forget what street this is, but it's downtown. So they are saying that, this is where...
It is kind of crazy. The street itself doesn't even look like a street. It's like a dirt
and it's
road, but then there's all these magnificent structures.
arches, which are an old architectural feature.
Then there's like this mountain up in the left that's like, has stuff. Okay.
And it's like 20 or 30 feet below where the ground level is. So why would you dig all that out? The theory here is that they were digging down to the limestone, to the bedrock to build on.
Okay.
Which makes sense. That's plausible. It's also, you can see the people up here, kind of, it looks like the top of the building isn't finished.
Okay.
There's a building, it's right next to the Quaff. I don't know if you've ever been
I
to
do not know the
Quaff.
Quaff.
Okay, it's downtown, and it has what looks like a facade on it, and it's these two red brick, like they're apartments now, essentially. And then there's a walkway, here's the street level, and the walkway goes down, and at the sidewalk level, like 1 story down, are arches at the ground level.
Okay.
Which implies that there's like a window or a door there, even below 1 story down from the ground level. So
okay.
if you take the straight theory is that they dug down to bedrock to build the buildings on, that they have then since re-raised the ground level up 1 or 20 more feet.
Okay.
And then built the roads and stuff on top of that.
Okay.
Why wouldn't you demolish the building, etc.? And the other thing about this, digging the street down like this, is that the river would flood. So they didn't want to, they wanted the buildings to be above and let the water pass through. There were lots of like ferries and steamboats. So they would still have access to like a landing point above where the water may rise.
Okay.
That's a square theory about it. The mud flood theory says that they excavated these structures
That's
and
crazy.
put facades on them.
Okay.
Like the Salt Lake Temple, Salt Lake City, the Mormon Temple, has a bunch of this stuff too, where like what is now the ground level has stairs going up, but if you take the entrances, they're huge. They're like 12 foot doors or bigger.
Yeah.
But if now they're like 8-foot doors because the ground level has been raised and like a false floor has been put in to make it human sized. The other
Wait, you said human sized?
Yes.
Okay, this is okay.
It gets weird. It gets so weird. But then if you just follow the history, the like, I'll call it the square theory. If you follow the square theory, it doesn't add up either. There's gaps in that story too.
Okay.
So like, okay, well, here's a, see, this is a map from 1869, and it is showing, like down here, essentially with that picture, like the streets have been dug out.
Right.
This is obviously an illustration, but like there's these mounds, which are 1 or 2 stories high, and then structures are built on top of them. I don't know.
That's so interesting.
And like, I've talked about this before. This is the West Bottoms, and this train would come across. This is Quality Hill. And it's limestone bedrock all under here, but there's tunnels dug into the bedrock into downtown where the trains would go into, and then you would go up to the ground level to like transport goods or people.
So just to clarify, this stuff was underground.
That's the mud flood theory.
Okay.
And this is just Kansas City, but if you think about structures like...
Well, you already mentioned Salt Lake.
The Salt Lake Temple, so that's a massive... The stone was quarried and carried there, and the thing that people... There was no railroad to that specific location, and so people with horse and buggy quarried and built, and it's almost like a pyramid building theory.
Yeah.
Like how did all and then
So we don't even know how we built our own.
They just say this architect, and then if you get into like who the people were, and then the lineages of the family, it points to like Masonic ties or the Mormon ties, where they
right.
Those were people with ideas of building society and creating narratives and okay.
All right.
So it just
all right.
gets
So I'll
weird.
go along with you. So we're excavating a previous culture, and that's where a lot of our old buildings come from.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm gonna pause there because it gets up to the 1850 timeline where this weird thing happened. The orphan trains.
Okay.
And I'll give you the square theory of this. And this happened all over the world. This is just at the same time, there were trains with what they called orphans or foundlings. The name foundling comes up.
Right.
Which means that these kids were found.
Isn't that also what they call like a fairy child?
I don't know.
Okay, hold on.
That's interesting. Okay.
All right, let me Google that.
So the Children's Aid Society was an organization in New York, along with the New York Foundling Hospital. They organized, quote, orphan trains that transported children from urban centers to rural areas such as Illinois, Kansas, and Iowa, ranging from infants to teenagers. The argument is that the industrial boom created extreme poverty and abandoned children in big urban areas like New York City or any major cities.
Right.
They created this problem of like people be fucking and then they're too poor to raise 19 children. Mm-hmm. Or, these children were just abandoned, and so then they started sending them to poorhouses. But those were like unsanitary, so it was creating these disease outbreaks.
Wait, so they just packed all these kids on trains and sent them out to the Midwest?
Yep.
Who were there people waiting there for them, or they were just trying to get them out of? Okay, all right.
There were people waiting, interested in adoption genuinely, while others saw children as sources of free labor for farms or households.
It's practical.
So there is.
Oh, this would have been happening right around the end of the cataclysm.
Yes.
All right.
And potentially.
And this happened all around the world.
There's reports of this in Russia, which is where the empire, they call it a global empire of Tartary or Tartaria.
Right.
And so there's stories of this in Russian history. They call them foundlings. Families were expected to provide food, shelter, education, and moral guidance, but oversight of these placements were minimal, leaving some children vulnerable to exploitation or abuse. It went up into 1929. So this says between 1854 and 1929, estimated 200 to 250,000 children were relocated, and that's just in the U.S.
That's so many people.
Yes.
Okay.
So the mud flood theory of the orphan trains is that they needed people to work on this, on rebuilding or building the civilization that we have now.
Right.
And this was also the time when the Salt Lake Temple was built, a bunch of state capitol buildings. The Iowa State Capitol is the mud flood community argues was discovered and not built.
Right.
And any pictures, which there was photography at this time, there was photography at this time, but there are very few pictures of the construction, like the groundbreaking of any of these, and they're almost all completed in the construction photos.
They're just adding facades.
They're adding facades. They're cleaning. They're putting wood-framed windows in to close the structure off, which wood building was many people, like pre-industrial, would have had those skills, woodworking.
Right.
And less people would have had access to stone and stoneworking because of the...
There are a lot of old-ass stone buildings kind of out in the middle of what would have been nowhere.
Yes.
Okay.
Like K-State campus is supposedly built on a tunnel system that's dug into the limestone bedrock, so could have been built on top of... Anyway. So that, I don't know. That's...
So they... Okay. So what, these kids are survivors?
That they were potentially the second generation of the survivors. And that they... Yeah.
Now,
essentially survivors.
I'll save my questions towards the end, but keep going.
Okay, so descendants of orphan train riders formed organizations to preserve their stories and legacies, such as the National Orphan Train Complex in Concordia, Kansas.
Oh.
Serves as a museum and research center, which I lived in Concordia. I went to Cloud County there. I wish I would have known this at the time. That was like 2004. That was like way before any of these theories were online. The first online presence of the quote unquote mud flood theory that's overtly stated is 2016.
Dang.
So just give me your questions now, because I don't have a clear... It's very difficult to make an argument for or against, because...
The orphan train thing's very interesting because...
That's just a weird, anomalous
just that one time people all across the world were shipping kids off. So my first thought was that a lot of this, you're talking 1650 to 1850.
Was the cataclysm, they're saying.
So a lot of history that we are taught in school takes place during that period. So the American Revolution.
Yes.
like, how is that accounted for, if at all? I mean, would that have been like a revolution because there was a cataclysm and like we took advantage of it?
That's a theory that the Europeans were not affected, that Europe was not as affected by this,
Okay.
but they knew of it happening. Because so we've talked about, like, we've seen the maps from like the 1600s of like Shalaga and these cities, so they probably knew there were trade routes down the like whatever the river is that goes through the Great Lakes, that was accessible from the Atlantic Ocean. So they could have gotten all the way to the middle of the U.S. on a boat from the Atlantic.
Right.
And that there may have been trade routes, and so they would have known of these places and would have had word. Word got out that there was a cataclysm, and they were like, oh, brand new land.
Now, I did hear recently that there's like a lot of weird stuff about San Francisco.
Yes.
And San Francisco is like on maps so early, and it's named San Francisco.
Yes.
Like even like Lewis and Clark and stuff, like it shouldn't be on these maps, and there's pictures of stone. I truly do believe that we were here earlier than we say. Now this would make sense why the whole history. So why would we cover up the history? Like, let's say Tartaria is real. It was this global civilization. This massive cataclysm happens. We're left to pick up the pieces. Like, why wouldn't that be a story we tell? Because, you know, throughout time, there's been stuff like the flood and the fall of Rome and all this stuff. Like, there's been horrible things that have happened that have, like, shifted the world. The plague. Like, why would we choose this specific event to not talk about?
Proposed theory is that that not only the technology of the civilization was advanced, but like the civilization itself was advanced. Like the moral,
Okay.
that they provided, you know, free energy, and through that would free up a ton of time.
So if you told people that, it'd piss them off.
To see like despotic rulers or governments trying to control you, when the earth would have provided basic, you know,
Right.
you would not need to work and pay for your basic necessities. That's just like a very simple. To create a new history and exclude that would give the people who were creating that history control.
Okay.
Because you would believe a certain thing, therefore behave in a certain way, and you're being manipulated essentially by not believing this is possible, or not even knowing it's possible.
Now that being said, there had to be people who survived
Yes.
to pick up the pieces. So is there any accounts of people like blowing the whistle on this? Like, is there anyone like the 1850s or?
I didn't look for that specifically.
Okay.
There probably
Now
isn't.
some maps have survived. You said that.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And so, okay, the other thing with the maps, another a pro mud flood argument is that the maps show. So it will say like, let's say 1620. And the way it's written on the map in the script, it looks like I or J 620.
Okay.
So that the I indicates the new timeline.
Okay.
And they've added 1,000 years to explain.
So this goes into the Phantom Time thing.
It ties in, but I don't know how specifically. But
Now 620 is pretty early. That's like the Roman Empire still exists. Like,
yeah.
yeah.
But and
So were the Dark Ages partially explained by this, or well, shit, the Dark Ages wouldn't exist because we'd skip right from Rome to like the Renaissance,
yes.
which would actually make a lot more sense because they're.
Think of how many generations
Right.
would have happened between Rome and the Renaissance.
Right.
that it doesn't make any sense that we went from like
Would have been like 50.
we bottomed out
Right.
as far as like technology and art and intellect and all these things, and then we just like
Now, are we...
to call it the Renaissance.
Right.
It's like it's like you're
It's
like
more like
you
you're
could easily retroactively apply that.
Right.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah. What was that we found out the other day? We were doing trivia. The Venus de Milo was like discovered.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like the telling of the history is something that the pro mudflood people use to justify their argument, but then it's also like, I don't know.
It's such a big...
It implies
It applies a lot.
a lot.
There's a lot going on
big
here.
if true. Like that's what it is. So
Right.
it's like, but it's easily like kind of debunkable at the same time.
Now let me ask you this. All right, so we think we know how this shit worked with like the stones and the copper roofs and the mercury. Has anyone like recreated? Because you get your hands on all those materials, I'm assuming. It's
Sure.
not like radioactive. So like, has anyone like tested this and built like a small house that runs off lightning or some shit? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
So it was like, I don't think, not that I know of. I would say not that I know of.
so we don't fully know how it would operate. We just know it's really weird they built stuff that way.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't get a picture of it, but another thing is like you go into like Victorian mansions and they have it's fireplaces. So fireplaces were like fitted retroactively, and what was there before was like what looks like a fireplace, this stone
Okay.
thing in the wall with
Flat screen TVs.
with with ESPN, but like a metal plate, and then two of the like they call it Antiquitech, but it's like essentially like a spire with a metal ball on top and then a point, like a little spire coming up from the top. There will be two of these in the fireplaces,
Okay.
and that would have created like a radiating type heat by like interacting.
Now, how do we know that was what leads you to say that was a thing?
There are pictures of it.
Oh, ooh. It's called, what's it called again? Archaeotech, or what was it?
Antiquitech is what they call it. So like,
All right, be sure to save that. Send it to me so I can put it up.
I don't know, I can't use Facebook on here. So
Oh, okay.
it's like the fireplace. This would have been a solid. The fireplace was because they didn't. The people who discovered this,
So it would have been like a radiator.
essentially,
It was like that metal thing in front is not for the fire, it's to like catch
to
electricity and
radiate
heat
the
up.
heat.
Okay.
And then the stones warm up, they would radiate heat. At a certain point, the whole room would have absorbed the heat. I had a friend who's an engineer who explained this to me also before I knew this theory, but like
So we know this existed.
yes.
This isn't even necessarily part of the conspiracy. It's just like something people used to do.
Yeah.
Huh.
And the argument is that like the pictures of this, if it have been used as a fireplace, there would be like soot stains on the stone, and there aren't in a lot of places. So either they had someone just scrubbing this shit 24/7. I don't know.
Be sure to save that.
I'll leave that
All right.
open.
Damn. Okay. So
This is kind of a side note, but this is a patent or a design for a tunnel boring machine.
It's huge.
Huge. These are like bushel carts. And this could be operated by one person. But this guy, Frederick Beaumont, when he was born in 1833, and in 1846, proposed this.
Wait, what? He was born in 18...
So he was 13.
Okay. Dude, people got shit done back in the day.
So this is like... okay. He saw service during the Crimean War, served with Turkish forces along the Danube. And this was insignia of the Turkish Continental Engineers, which have like Roman characteristics. A man riding
now,
a
you know the
lion.
Ottoman Empire.
Go on.
Well, Turkey was essentially Rome
Yeah.
for a while. They even called themselves, when they're Ottomans, they called themselves Rome or Roman. Because Rome was such a big idea that they kind of conquered or took it over, and then they just called themselves the thing they conquered.
So yeah.
Well, okay, wait. So what? Tell me about the. Okay, so the idea is those coins are old and they look like Roman stuff, though, because we lost 1,000 years. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's the mud flood argument.
Okay,
but
yeah.
they're like you're saying, yes, they were Rome, so Turkey would like know that history and like kind of honor it in their symbols
Right.
too. So it just that kind of like cancels. They're both.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying.
It's a fucking quagmire of like there is no proof.
Well, you can't because
There is proof in one
this
way.
isn't saying all of history is fake. It's just saying that
Yes.
like we've been lied to about a very specific. So any proof you find of it, you could explain away.
with
essentially.
an official narrative.
Yeah.
But okay, so the argument from authority is a logical fallacy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the skeptics of the mud flood kind of rely on.
They're just saying, well, that's not what I was taught.
Yes,
Okay, yeah.
essentially.
Oh, that's a mind fuck, dude. Yeah.
This is why I love this.
Yeah.
Because I cannot fucking wrap my mind around
Well, there's
it.
like no. I'm trying to think of ways. I'm not trying to think of ways to disprove this because like I don't have to. If I disagreed, I wouldn't have to disprove it. I'll say you're fucking crazy. Here's a history fact. I'm trying to think of ways to prove this. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like, that's why I ask about like whistleblowers, or has anyone tested the mercury thing, or
So this is, yeah, I'll have to look into that.
I want to believe. So what is this?
This is a bank that in Shanghai in Hong Kong.
Oh my god.
But if you were to not know where that was built,
That does not look Chinese.
where would you guess it was built? Yes, the architecture is not.
Do you know what year that is?
This says 1920. Obviously, cars.
Okay,
down
now
here.
the British did have China for a long time. Okay, see, this is the problem. This is this is the problem.
But did they?
Yeah, right.
Because all I know, I wasn't there. But you know,
Right.
like it is like
Right.
history.
Part of the story is that they covered up history, so you're gonna have an explanation for everything.
Yes.
Okay.
But like this is a good example of like the architecture and like in 1920 it looks faded. Like if these cars are black, that is not fresh stone.
Right.
It would be polished stone. And then the dome, which was like for inner, so you can see the little sphere at the top. Like this is like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I got you.
So
I see where this. Okay.
it is. I don't know. That's it. Like
Okay.
that's the theory. And there is like, it gets crazier and crazier. They imply that the Tartarians were giants. There's pictures of like
That's all. Okay, we've been dancing around this giant thing ever since you said human sized. Okay.
Like the story of the Nephilim, the Mormons have stories of that.
Yes, there are giant mounds in North America, and when you talk to the Native American tribes, and we're like, "How would you build these?" or "What's your story?" They're like, "We didn't build them.
Yeah.
Giants built them."
Giant
They just tell you.
red-haired people.
Yeah.
There's pictures of like, of let's say average height 5'8" person, and then like.
And there were mounds in that Kansas City map.
Yes.
All right, keep going. There's pictures of people.
There is a giant graveyard under downtown Kansas City.
Let's just get it all out there. Giants are real. They're buried all around us. Big people. You never seen people like this.
Have you seen Baron Trump? This is like
Baron Trump, the time traveler.
Yes, he escaped the cataclysm. Made it back to the stronghold and used their technology to warn us. Yeah, the giants. There are pictures from like around the 1850s of like people from Russia who are like 9 feet tall, standing next to like some.
I kind of think that might be. I kind of think. Oh right, I worked for this guy for a month. Like I said, the name of where I worked. In his business, he had a cast of a Bigfoot footprint. Okay. And one day I dared to ask him, "What's the deal? What is that?" He's like, "That's a real cast. I took it myself. I see the shit you see on TV. I saw it with my own eyes, and I worked around it."
He took it himself.
He took it himself, and apparently he was a Bigfoot hunter part-time. He was a successful business owner, and one of his passions was to hunt Bigfoot.
Did he say where he took it?
I do not remember. I should have asked more questions. But he had this cast of a Bigfoot foot, and it was pretty fucking convincing. And I've heard the argument, like, if a regular person steps in, like, mud or snow, eventually that gets bigger. But this was, like, a perfect footprint that was fucking huge. And I trust this guy. He was, like, a Christian, a business owner. Like, there's no reason he would just, out of nowhere, fake a fucking Bigfoot footprint and never talk about it unless you act, like... There's no reason. And this guy was super into Bigfoot, and he told me, it didn't take a lot of prying, he told me he believes Bigfoot are Nephilim.
Okay.
And it's like the remnants of a past race that used to be all over the earth. And essentially they've gone back to like primitive living, and they're like scared of us. Not scared of us, but like they prefer to be left alone. And they used to be everywhere, and they're the people who built the mounds and a bunch of and I to this day I regret not keeping that relationship, because I would love to fucking call him up right now on speakerphone and be like, I got some shit to ask you about giants.
Yeah.
And that made, honestly, of anything I've ever saw, that talking to this guy convinced me there's something to the Bigfoot thing. He just had no reason. Okay.
Yeah. There's no reason to like out yourself.
He had zero reason. Yeah.
He didn't have a YouTube channel.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. It was just a thing he did. He said he had an experience that got him interested, and he, on his own time. And I'm like, all right, Bigfoot's real. I don't know what to do with this information.
Here's another like strange part of the. Okay, this is. Let me say the name of the building. The Chicago Federal Building.
Okay.
This was built. I don't know what year exactly it was built, but they built this structure, and then 60 years later,
built this structure. Okay.
Bigfoot built this structure, and then 60 years later, they tore it down.
What? Did they fuck it up? Why they do that?
I don't know.
Okay. Wow.
So imagine the amount of like.
I would feel like that would take 60 years to build.
With
carts.
The U.S. mail.
Was
cart and buggy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
So like. That's the pro mud flood argument, is like, how do horse and buggy people, how are they master stonemasons? What?
Oh.
If like, how long would it take you to build this, and under what like type of like direction to like organize a crew and feed them and house them
Yeah.
and then
Why would you even? How does anything get done at all? Yeah.
and the other like along that kind of same argument are like the World's Fair structures. There was a lot of World Fair. This was 1893, so they built this for the World Fair.
Just looks like a whole ass Roman city.
And it wiped it out.
What?
Completely fucking destroyed it.
What? Why would you do that? That's crazy. But okay, so are they destroying these because it's evidence?
That's the argument.
But then why would you have a World's Fair?
To show the new world can do this.
Yeah, and then you wipe it out and start over.
And then you build a fucking...
But then other things you don't wipe out at all, you just use them.
Yeah.
Are there... Okay. Shit.
And
yeah, okay.
And then the rest of the city is like rectangle wood structures
Right,
that
yeah.
get destroyed in the Chicago fire. You know, it's like...
So... All right, so here's another question. Okay, so Tartaria, we have maps. Are there any other documents or references? Like, is there like a letter from the King of England to the King of Tartaria?
I don't know.
Okay.
The name Tartary or Tartaria kind of referred to a peoples. And that is kind of, it's a name, I don't know the history of Tartary.
Can I tell you something that I have read about this?
Yeah.
That I don't know if this is true. It's just a theory. So I have heard that Tartaria is just a variation of barbarians.
That's kind of, yes.
Reference land that was like outside of the European.
Yes, that's
Okay.
they say that.
Okay. But it's kind of weird just to call. God damn it! Fucking Bigfoot built the whole world. Now we gotta live. Now they just go into their. Oh, I just did a Nazi salute. Now they just go into their. Go back into their woods. What you looking up here?
I'm looking up the etymology of Tartar.
I heard that it essentially was a word for like all the people that were outside of the kind of sphere of Roman influence.
Yes. Tartar, a member of the combined forces of Central Asian peoples, including Mongols and Turks, who under the leadership of Genghis Khan conquered much of Asia.
Now you can't deny that Genghis Khan existed.
Yeah.
Like 1/4 of the world is his kids.
A harsh, fierce, or intractable person. Yeah, it's kind of a slur or like a derogatory.
Yeah, Tartar.
The thing that, so I like my culinary background, tartar sauce,
Look at the use over time.
beef tartar.
Look at the use over time. Okay, I'm not going to put this up on the thing, but there's Google, when you Google a word, it tells you the use over time. It is like huge in 1800 or 1900. People are using this word all the time. 1800?
Yeah.
People are using the word tartar like, can you screenshot that? Is there a way to like?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to put this up.
And then,
That to me, this is to me is evidence that there's something up with this, because
so like 2019 was the last, and then like this would be.
right when people were talking about it again.
Yep.
But like this was a word that people apparently used all the fucking time 200 years ago. That is weird. So that tells me there are documents. There's some, because Google didn't exist 200 years ago, so people weren't.
Right. They're just, and Google is just like scanning every document in turning it into a digital searchable format, and then yeah, you can like.
All right. I think we need a part 2 eventually. It doesn't have to be next week, but we should become Tartaria researchers.
These are some interesting like searches. What does tartar mean in Wicked?
And what?
Wicked. So apparently they reference it in the movie Wicked. Mm-hmm. Shakespeare referenced it.
Interesting.
To catch a tartar. To deal with someone or something that proves unexpectedly troublesome or powerful.
Oh.
So there's an idiom. Okay, I don't know. I think
Now
we need
that's interesting. Shakespeare.
we do need a part 2, and we'll approach it from the questions you've asked, like looking for references to it. There was I think Julian Huxley, Aldous Huxley's brother, wrote some book about like an excursion to Tartary. He like dealt with this. He like researched like the lost history of Tartary.
Yeah.
And he was British intelligence. So like, okay, here's another thing. So like after, when we went to the Gulf War, we go to Saudi Arabia. There's all kinds of ruins and crazy shit from the like that region has a ton of ancient history.
Yeah, it was Babylon.
Yes, and like Gilgamesh, the theory is that we went back, we were trying to find the tomb of Gilgamesh. That we weren't there for oil, that we were there to secure relics.
Whoa.
And there are like
the Lost Ark. We're the Nazis.
there are there are a lot of stories of like soldiers who would go to these, they were like sent to these places.
Well, there's the
secure them.
Afghan giant stories.
And it ties
They say
in.
they killed, found and killed giants. Yeah. I've also heard there's a lot of Alexander the Great architecture and stuff in Afghanistan. That's completely, because that was part of his empire. That's essentially inaccessible or destroyed by the Taliban. But we know it exists because we have the history.
Yeah. So these are, I didn't say the details of where these were from, these pictures, but I think we can just run a little slideshow here at the end and kind of, is that possible?
Well,
I don't know.
I'll just have to put them up one by one.
We don't have to, but just like for your...
We have to.
Yeah.
So
these are like modern examples of excavation, street level, and these were obviously windows and 2 stories down.
I've always wondered, archaeologists... Okay, you got like the Colosseum, right? And it's like still there. You got like the Vatican, you got like certain Roman things, the pyramids are above ground, and then they have to dig so far down for some shit. They'll be like, they just discovered, for instance, like where they think, like a couple years ago, they discovered what they actually think is the place that Jesus was at the wedding where he turned water into wine. This is a real story.
Okay.
They just discovered it because it's in that town, and it would have been like the event space. Like they know this based on the layoff, but like it took hundreds of years of digging to find this shit. But then there's other stuff from that time that's just like in other areas that's just completely preserved. And it's like, why is some stuff just buried? Like that, that doesn't make any sense, because you can go to like, shit doesn't just get buried.
Yeah.
I can walk around. I mean, I can find places in America that are like Swirly's Tavern in New York or whatever. A lot of shit in New York. It's like a couple hundred years old. Like, shouldn't that be half underground by now? You know what I mean? Like, something had to happen.
This is, that's the argument for the mud flood. Is that liquefaction, like,
And it wouldn't bury everything. It's just like any natural disaster. We were looking at pictures of the fire. There's one house, and then everything around it's fucking destroyed. It doesn't. No natural disaster destroys everything.
Correct.
And especially big thing. But then like other shit is just you have to dig 12 feet underground to find a fucking building that there was no okay.
Yeah.
Well,
this is shit. What's it called?
Coral Castle? Wait, what is it?
This is in New Mexico.
Okay.
And this, they argue that this is the result of volcanism from, rock flowing up from the ground. But here they argue that this is stonework.
Okay. Hey, dude, I mean, there are places in Eastern Europe, there are places in South America,
Bosnian temples.
There are temples and pyramids that are like covered in earth.
Yes.
And it defies explanation how any civilization, no matter how bad things got, would let that happen over time. And not now I could understand stealing the stones because you're having bad times to go build some houses with the stone, but like to just let Earth take over a pyramid, like something had to happen.
Yeah.
That's okay. Well, okay. I'm not convinced, but I'm not convinced. You've tantalized me.
These are some pictures of Kansas City. That look like excavation.
What the fuck? What? Why would you do that if you didn't have to?
I don't know. That doesn't seem like a natural formation. That seems like it was sheared off and it's from the Kansas City Public Library.
Stay in school.
Yep.
Take a look, it's in a book. Bigfoot's built America.
Yeah.
So they're giants. What? I don't even know where to go from here.
Me neither. Like, this is where I get, because I go down these rabbit holes. I'm like, damn.
Why do we think they're giants again? Just because people talk about giants and we find, and that shit's real big. Okay. That's a lot. This is a lot.
This
is what TinFoil Friday is all about.
It's a lot. That's all I have. It's a lot. We'll do a part 2. We'll research it from a different angle. But I just wanted to present this as a quandary.
It is a quandary. It appears that we're digging old-ass buildings out of the ground that are all made out of stone and would be very highly inconvenient to build. And then we also are finding a lot of stuff buried.
Something I didn't touch on is there are what are called star forts. Have you ever seen these?
Yes, there's one. That's the thing I was listening to about San Francisco.
Okay.
The maps from before anyone built anything there had fucking star forts on them.
And those architectural, the argument is that they are designed in such a way, like on the coastline, to deflect waves, to like break the tide essentially, or also to deflect cannonball fire. If it's a straight wall and you hit it, it's going to punch a hole through it and knock it over.
Right.
But if it's an angle, it deflects the energy. Okay, that all makes sense. But those structures are everywhere.
Yes.
The entire world has star forts in coastal and other strategic locations. So it implies one builder.
Yeah.
One people. There's either something inherent in the design that serves that purpose so well, so it's mimicked, or there was just a uniform like idea about architecture and it just got applied to wherever those people were.
If you are watching this and you are a Bigfoot, and you have a family member who is a Bigfoot, I need you to leave a comment.
We should get on Feet
Like
Finder.
and subscribe. Yeah, we're gonna go on Feet Finder and find some Bigfoot. I need to hear your stories. I need to know.
I reached out to a guy who has an Instagram account. He has like 500,000 followers, and he talks about Kansas City a lot. That's like he's like a mud flood.
You reached out to him.
I reached out to him. Did not get a reply, but maybe for part 2, he did say business inquiry in his contact, so he might charge. But
get him on this.
That's what I'm saying. Maybe he would be willing to talk to us about Kansas City, and then we can also maybe.
Is he from here? Does he live here?
I think he's from Indiana.
And he's like fixated on Kansas City.
He said Kansas City is like very anomalous.
Okay.
In this context, it like supports the theory pretty well. So interesting, homegrown. We're sitting on top of a fucking quagmire, Dennis.
I know. Well, great work.
I'm going back to the cave in Roanoke Park. If you don't hear from me in 3 days,
I'll be doing the show alone.
throw some fucking beef jerky through the hole, and
I'm gonna have a mannequin with a volleyball head that I call Nick.
says one bloody handprint on it. Yeah, like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe.
Follow for more. We are exactly as insane as it appears.
If you want to see part 2, you gotta subscribe.
Yep.
All right. Great work.
We'll do part 2. 100 followers. We'll do part 2.
That could be done in a week.
So,
All right. Get at it. Love you.
I gotta be late to work. I'll see you guys later.